Hi, everybody. I'm Debby Montgomery Johnson, founder of the nonprofit The Woman Behind the Smile, and your host of Stand Up and Speak Up, a show that is about each and every one of us. Many of us have something we're hiding, something we're ashamed of, something not through no fault of our own or through our own making we keep hidden, and that in turn keeps us hidden from each other and the world. Good people go through terrible situations. Wise people know when and how to let it go. Everything that happens to us helps us grow, and while it may be hard to see it right away, the most important thing to do is to change your perception about your circumstances. Regardless of what your personal experiences or traumas have been, this showcase series is designed to ignite the light in you, as well as providing safe harbor, education, personal growth, and resources so that no matter where you are on your journey, you'll have the courage to move on when you're ready. Stand Up and Speak Up features ordinary people who've been through extraordinary situations and struggles and found the courage to step out from behind their smiles and speak up about their experiences and the lessons gleaned from those experiences. Everybody heals at a different pace, and we recognize that. So come on in, have a listen, and enjoy the ride at your own speed. It's a beautiful day in paradise, and I always say that for my Canadian friends because down here in Florida, it is a beautiful day in spite of the rain that's going to be coming in tonight. I was teasing my husband as he's getting ready to go to the golf course that it doesn't matter that it's raining because my orchids are in heaven when it rains. Didn't make him happy, but it's a beautiful day in paradise here, and I'm so excited to have a very special guest with us coming in from Utah. It's early in the morning there, and I so appreciate him being here. Our special guest today is Mr. Hugh Vail, and Hugh, are you there?
I am here.
I wanted everybody to know that Hugh and I have not met in person, which is true about me and a lot of my guests, but I was introduced to him through our Awakening Giants group. He was on a summit that I was on, and when I heard when I heard what Hugh does with Mustang Medicine, I'm like, I have got to talk to this man. Because Hugh, we haven't really talked, but the organization I work with that I'm on the board of directors of, which is called SCARS, the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, I work with a lot of women and some men that have been through some real trauma due to an online relationship fraud that took a lot of money, a lot of heart, a lot of everything away from them. And so when I heard what you're doing, I'm thinking, you know what, that would be a really interesting topic in light of what we're doing. We're going to go back a little bit in time so we get to know who you are a little bit. I'd like to know a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, if you have siblings, hobbies, those kinds of things. So could you tell me a little bit about you so I get to know who you are?
Yes. I grew up predominantly in Southern California. My parents met when they were just getting into college, and I think my dad was 18 and my mom was 21 when I was born. And I was born in 1981. And we went back to my dad's hometown, Santa Barbara, California. That's where he was born. That's where his parents were born. That's where their parents were born. If you go to the Santa Barbara mission, many of my ancestors are born in the walls of the Santa Barbara mission. My grandfather was an electrician, and so and that's what he did his entire life. So we spent a lot of our youth in Santa Barbara. There was an interesting period where we weren't being tested for ADD back then. And so I ended up going to a couple different high schools. My junior year of high school, I had an accumulative GPA of 0.17. But I was also reading books like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And basically the disconnect was, if I'm not interested in it, I am literally not interested in it. And I don't know if that's a strength or a deficiency because what I am interested in, I am very interested in, and I throw all of my time and attention into it. And it's like I become almost obsessive about it. I later, and this is like 2010-ish, maybe 2009, went actually to a psychologist and got tested for ADD. I had a marriage that was struggling, and I walked into this psychologist and I said, I think I'm broken. You got to fix me. Give me the pill. I don't care. I don't want this marriage to fall apart, and I'll do whatever. And she said, well, I don't think you have any major problems. And I was like, oh, I got major problems. Like my marriage is falling apart, and I don't want that to happen. And so, fix me. She said, well, crazy people don't walk into a doctor's office and say, I think I'm crazy. The crazy people always say, I'm not crazy, it's the other person that's crazy. So she said, but what I will do is let's put you through a series of tests. I went through a test on attention deficit disorder. I found out there are 5 different types that they test for. Of the 5 different types, there are 2 ADHDs. One is hyperactivity. I don't have that. The other is hyperfocus. I do have that. I scored as an outlier on the test. So if it gets my attention, it gets all of my attention. If it doesn't get my attention, it gets none of my attention, and I just chase butterflies and shiny things, and so that's how I ended up finding out, why things are such a struggle for me to do, like basic things like your homework when you don't want to do your math homework. I mean, it's like pulling teeth from a tiger. I just really struggle with it. That was a really significant thing throughout my life. I've been divorced twice, and I've got 2 kids. There's a very deep, painful story behind that. I've never told that publicly, but essentially, 2 years ago, my wife at the time and my ex got into a legal situation, and the way to make the whole legal situation go away, I ended up having to give my 2 kids up for adoption. And that's the short side of it, and that creates tremendous, deep sorrow. And I would say that's probably been my probably all of ours. I don't want to make this like a super sad thing. I've had an amazing life, but in juxtaposition of an amazing life and doing some of the most incredible things, I've also experienced some of the deepest sorrow that I think my soul could have ever handled. And I know that just because there were times that I literally felt just like my heart was shattered and my spirit was just totally, absolutely broken. The day that I signed the adoption papers, my daughter was 12 years old, my son was 10. I never missed, I had standard minimum custody. I never missed my weekends. Of course, over 12 years, you're going to have like some little things, but like 99.9% of the time, I never missed it. If I did, because of work, I had the job where I traveled around different parts of the world. So, you got to say, hey, my flight doesn't come in here. Can we swap? And we were usually able to work that out. But the day I signed that, I remember walking out to the horse pen. Again, this is in 2020. This is not long ago. I remember. I don't know how to all I can do is just tell you what I experienced. It felt as if my soul left my body because I grieved so hard, and it felt like my soul and my body, for some reason, could not remain together in that level of grief as I just sobbed, and all I could say was no, just over and over and over. I just kept saying no, like, no, this is not happening. And so I've had extremely deep sorrow. Divorce creates deep sorrow. I'm becoming well experienced with that. I don't think I should be allowed to make life choices when it comes to companions in marriages. Apparently I need to go to school for that.
Don't beat yourself up on that one.
All in all, I think what I have come to learn, and this is kind of where Mustang Medicine comes into play, because there's two ways to tell our stories. There's the blame, shame narrative, and then there is the accountability and empathy narrative. And what I have learned with deep emotional wounds is that we are the only ones that can heal our deep emotional wounds. And I think deep emotional wounds come from feelings or experiences that generate feelings like abandonment, rejection, any type of abuse. I mean, these are things, we all have some experience with. And these types of things, there's nothing that anyone else can say. Even the person that was involved in the abandonment or the rejection, if you were rejected or you were abandoned, right? Even if that person came back, what would they say? This is what I've thought about many times. What would they say to me that I would say, okay, yeah, emotional wound healed. Thank you for your words. What could they do to restore that? And I think in most cases, if not all cases, the answer is nothing. So what I've learned is that it's how I tell the story that heals my wound. And this is extremely challenging, like extremely, extremely challenging. It may be one of the most difficult things that we ever do, is to realize that the emotional wounds that we have, being so painful, can only be healed by the person who has the emotional wound. Because I went to therapists and they never said anything that healed it. They never did anything. I had people that had hurt me come back and apologize to me, and I still found out that months and years later I was still angry or hurt. The wound was still open and bleeding on my life. And so I was almost 17. I ran away from home. And I ran away because of the dysfunction of my parents and the dynamics of that setting. And there was physical abuse, mostly mental and emotional abuse that was there. I hate to throw that word around. I think we all throw it around way too much. But there was not gentleness. There was not healthy boundaries. There was really some challenging things that went on. And so for me, I left that. I didn't find out till a couple decades later that I still have abandonment wounds from those early years. And I think that's healthy. I think that's normal. I think I should have that. But what I think is even better is those got to be healed. And my parents have apologized. My parents have taken accountability. And yet I still had those wounds for so long, even after my parents. And this is when what I recognized is that, and you guys might resonate with this, I don't know, that it's deep self-awareness. You might have a friend that you hear them saying, you're trying to apologize to, and the apology is never good enough. And it's like, when does it become good enough? I think it becomes good enough when we change the story about what happened to us to something that happened for us. And that's where you break off into the two types of stories.
Excuse me, I'm sitting here just basically speechless because I understand. I understand what you're saying about when you're a kid and you're hyper-focused. My second son is like that. And extraordinary young man. Gifted in so many ways. But was the second child that didn't want to follow after his brother's footsteps, wanted to do it himself, and he's become an extraordinary military pilot. Loves golf.
Oh, that's amazing.
Focuses like ultra focused on something. You know, when he's playing golf, he's only playing golf. When he's flying, he's only flying. It's just so I'm listening to what you're saying. That's extraordinary. As far as the deep hurt, I'm so sorry about what happened with the children and your marriages. I found after my husband passed away that there are things that actually, we'd been married 26 years. There are things that happened that hurt me deeply in the marriage. And when he died, for years after, I had this hurt was still there, but I couldn't express it. And it turned to anger and frustration. And I'm like, how can I be angry at someone that's dead? And it wasn't until I had gone to a self-awareness group. It's called Essence of Being with my friend Burge Smith-Lyons. And Burge had this program where we had someone there as a vicarious, stand-in for the person that had hurt you. And I apologized. I apologized for holding on to those feelings because I knew, he couldn't come back and apologize. And I knew he had, but I'm not sure that I accepted it at the time. But he did what he needed to do. He apologized. But I had to forgive what he did. I had to forgive myself for those feelings, and I had to release it. I'm like, this is not benefiting me at all, And the same thing happened after the scam. When I found out that the 2-year relationship I had been a scam and I'd lost $1 million, a lot, he asked for forgiveness. And I'm thinking, you know what? I had to do that for me so I could move forward. But when you said, how would you feel if he came back and apologized now? I'm thinking, I'm not waiting for an apology. I'm beyond that, Whatever he says to me, it's not going to change how I am now because it's been 9 years, and I really have worked hard to get through it, past it, moved beyond, because you have I want to get into a lot of the stuff that you've brought about with the Just Be workshop, and just be grateful, the no complaining, no blaming, no shaming, no sorrow wasted. When you can find the purpose in why we've been through these things and use it for good, for me, that's been the most beneficial in my life. And
yeah, that's exactly
a lot younger than me, so I give you great credit for what you're doing. So going into this morning, I had so many notes in so many different places, and you've changed it for me, which is really excellent. I thank you for being so vulnerable and open, because what you went through is happening to a lot of our friends and my kids, and people don't usually express it. So thank you for doing that, because it opens up a dialogue. And you've been working with the Mustangs for years. So how did your training help you get through what you're going through now? Did it?
Yeah, basically what happens, this is such an interesting thing. I know it's true about horses because I know the brain science behind horses. This may be true about many other animals. But horses have such a dear, compassionate place in the human heart. And I think humans have a dear, compassionate place in the horse's heart. And so I think there's maybe a God-given reciprocity that's there between the horse and the humans. We've had them as our main source of transportation, from helping plow the garden fields and helping go to the battlefields, delivering the mail, visiting grandma and grandpa, getting from point A to point B. I mean, for thousands and thousands of years, it's been horse and human. They've been, and predominantly around the world, that's true. Horses don't have very good reasoning skills. The reason they don't have good reasoning skills is because they do not have a prefrontal cortex. Humans have the most developed prefrontal cortexes of all creations on the earth. Primates come, I think, in second place. But dolphins have, if I remember correctly, dolphins have really good prefrontal cortexes. So there are some mammals that are out there that are quite evolved in the reasoning skills, but no one is more evolved in reasoning, imagination, creativity. These are the functions of the prefrontal cortex. The downside to the prefrontal cortex is that I can create a narrative, because as humans, we tell and live our lives in stories. This is how we learn. This is how we share. This is how we make sense of things that happen. This means that with a prefrontal cortex, it's going to be very, very easy for me to dwell on the pain of the past. It's also going to be very, very easy for me to trip on the anxiety of the future. Horses don't do that. So all a horse does is live in the now. And when you live in the now, there's basically only one thing that you're kind of ever going to really be. You're always going to prioritize just a couple things. Food, safety, reproduction, your basic survival stuff. The only question that a horse ever asks, particularly wild horses, because when they grow up in the wild, they are free to roam wherever they want and do whatever they want, and they are surviving. They are constantly in survival mode because of the difficulties of being out in the wild. If the weather's not trying to kill you, the predators are. If the predators aren't trying to kill you, finding enough food and water, so starvation and dehydration are trying to kill you. And then if you go and look online and find all these really magnificent photos, because there are amazing photographers that go out there and follow certain herds in the western United States, and they take these pictures, you'll see that most wild horses have huge battle wounds and battle scars. And that's not coming from the mountain lion. If the mountain lion gets you, the chances are you're done. That's coming from within the herd dynamics. And proper vernacular is horses, we say they live in herds, but in actuality, the proper way to say it is that they live in families, and horses are a matriarchal society. The stallion does his thing, and he stands up on the hill, and he overlooks, and he's going to protect, and he'll get into the fight with the mountain lion if needed. But the real dynamics of the family is ran by the matriarchs. It's ran by the mares, and it's really a beautiful thing about that. But
can I ask a quick question? I was watching one of your videos of them out there, and it occurred to me, who's leading? Who leads when they're running? Is that the matriarch of the herd, of the family? When
they're running, if they're running from danger, or they're typically that's the stallion's role, is to say, this is where we're going. I'll take us to a safe space. It's when they're out and they are resting, relaxing, digesting the food that they're eating, and they're just kind of in a calm, confident state of being. And the little ponies are running around, and the foals are playing around, and they're misbehaving and getting into trouble, and some of them have got ADD or something I say that jokingly because that's me. And there is the matriarch, and there is a head matriarch. And if another mother is, not taking care of her little pony running around, the head matriarch will come in and discipline. And so they're keeping those dynamics basically, 90% of the time, that's how the dynamics are, and it's the matriarchs that are keeping that all together. Who stays, who goes, who's in timeout, and helping them, basically helping them survive. And so I think nature teaches us many great things, but there are so many scars on many of these Mustangs, and it's because they get into fights with each other. And so really most of their scars and their wounds are happening either from their families or their friends and their neighbors. It's like, gosh, that's a lot like us.
Mm-hmm.
So when we bring them in from the wild, it's really, I have a video. You bring this wild horse in and you give them water. You got to walk in the wild. They're going to walk like 15, 16 miles every day just to get enough nutrition and hydration. You bring them into a pen, they're going to walk like 15 to 16 feet and have all the food they want, all the water that they want. And if you adopt them from the government, it's the Bureau of Land Management that's responsible for the Wild Horse and Burro program. They want you to have fencing that's of a certain caliber. They want you to, you have to, or you can't adopt them. You've got to have shelter. And these are conveniences and comforts that do not exist in the wild. And it does not matter to that horse because of his state of survival. He thinks, or she thinks, that everything is out to kill them, because that has been true in the wild. And now you bring them into domestic life, and you cannot gentle a wild horse with affection. Even though affection does have to be a part of the formula, for the gentling formula, it is the last piece. They need exercise, they need discipline in their character development, and then they need affection. This is Cesar Millan stuff. He says you have to have exercise, discipline, and an affection, and you have to have it in that order. So this tends to, span across different mammals. The point, though, is that what we've learned from the wild horses is the discipline. Horses develop character excellences, and when I say character excellences, what I mean is things like courage and wisdom and temperance and gentleness and patience. Horses develop character excellences just like humans do. I cannot help a wild horse transition from surviving to thriving. You can imagine that inner transformation that has to take place on the inside of the horse. I cannot help the horse become something I am not. So in other words, I'm going to teach and I'm going to train what I am. And so for me, having lived a life of surviving, that seems like a pretty big disaster, to take a wild horse and a wild human and put those two together and say, yeah, they will be gentle and they will both have great inner peace. It's not going to happen.
My husband and I and you'll probably laugh at this, we just started watching the show Yellowstone. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting. The dynamics are very interesting between the humans and the horses. And I was jotting down earlier as I was watching some of your videos, is that the human element, many of the characteristics are very evil in this particular show. And
totally.
As they're bringing in the horses, they're breaking the horses. And I was looking at one last night. It was a guy that they qualify as really stupid, but anyway, they duct taped him to a bucking bronco.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, that's idiotic, and it broke him, and I don't know if it broke the horse, but it broke the person. And so I was watching that and that element, and I'm thinking about what you're talking about, gentling the wild horse. But then on the other end, you've got the Kevin Costner character who was trying to find some sort of solace and quiet time in the stable with one of his horses, but just, after he was picking up all the horse dung. So, there's I'm just trying to get this whole emotional, mental connection between the horses and the way people were treating them. And then I'm listening to how you do it. I'm like, that makes so much sense. The horse doesn't know. You said something about, what's the horse saying when it bucks? So explain that to people. What is the horse saying when someone jumps on its back?
What he's saying is, I don't feel safe. Right? Basically, all you have to do is think if a mountain lion just climbed on your back, what would you do?
Yeah, no way.
You'd run around like a banshee.
Yeah.
You'd buck, you'd throw, you'd flop on the ground, you'd do whatever. And then, if the roles were reversed, imagine someone, or some other mammal that's more evolved than humans sitting there watching you freak out and panic with a mountain lion on your back, and they'd be like, let's just duct tape that mountain lion to their back. They'll get over it. I mean, that's very similar. Now, the reason that it works with the horses, to be very very clear, we don't want to anthropomorphize. That's a very fancy word for they don't reason and imagine and create stories in their heads like humans do, because they don't have the prefrontal cortex. So what that means is that once the mountain lion climbs off your back and you realize the mountain lion is gone, you go right back to rest, calm, and confidence. I mean, they can down-regulate their emotions. Horses have the same thoughts, feelings, and emotions that humans do. They even have tear ducts. I've seen horses cry. And so they have the same thoughts, feelings, and emotions as humans do. However, what they don't have is they don't have the ability to go dwell on the past or trip on the future. They just go right back to the now. They're like
they're not angry at the mountain lion for being on their back. They've forgotten about that.
Not at all. They're just
are they scared? Are they scared he's going to come back though? Do they have that quality?
Yeah. That's a function in the hypothalamus. Uh-huh. So they have incredible memories. And if it did not go well and the mountain lion comes back, they're going to ramp up anxiety.
Okay.
So when you just duct tape a guy, going back to your story with Yellowstone, which I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie, let's be honest. I play with wild horses. It's funny to me. I would never do it. I would never do it. And the reason I would never do it is because it doesn't help, because you actually create more things that have to be undone.
Right.
And so what's happening is this horse thinks, the horse knows that the human is the predator for one simple reason. All predators have eyes in the front of their face. This gives you a hunting advantage to obtain the angle that you need for attack. All prey animals have eyes on the sides of their face. So it's not so much even an intention thing or an energetic thing as much as it's a biology thing. You got eyes in the front of your face, you potentially are going to hurt me. You also got these little canine teeth, and they pick up on all that stuff, and so they're like, that guy eats meat, right? And so there's just natural things that the horse can sense from surviving for, as long as they've been around on the earth. It doesn't mean that they can't grow the confidence and the courage, the bravery to be able to overcome that relationship and those natural fears that would exist, but it's how we go about it. So when you don't have a prefrontal cortex, you're not going to dwell on the past and you're not going to trip on the future. All you care about is, how does it feel right now? So if I have got to put a saddle on you, and now think about a saddle, what is a saddle made of? It's made of leather. What's leather? Dead animal skins. These horses are smart. They get it. So they're like, something had to die, and you're going to throw that on top of me, and you're the king predator. This doesn't feel like a good situation. So when horses, get this big old 40-pound saddle put on their back and they've never had anything there, and you quickly try to cinch it up, they're going to buck it off because they're thinking, I don't know what this is, and they don't know what it is, and they can't reason with it because they don't really have a prefrontal cortex to reason with things, so they just are what they are. So to answer the question, bucking is a way, it's a very violent attempt to run from your problems. That's what it really is. I don't know how to solve this problem. I'm going to try to run from it. I'm going to try to fight it. And if I can't run fast enough from it because, it's attached to their back and tightened around their girth, well, then I'll try to go up and down. I'll go sideways. I'll spin. I'll slam it into the wall. I mean, they're gonna just try to survive. And as soon as that thing doesn't come off, and it didn't kill him, they're like, oh, well, I'm safe right now. And so they can quickly change the narrative of what is happening to them to something that is happening for them. Because the thing that complicates that story in the human experience is our amazing prefrontal cortex. Because if I strap something onto you that you thought was going to kill you, even if it didn't end up killing you, how many times are you going to go back and replay it in your mind? What a jerk I am for strapping that onto you in the very first place. A horse will never have that thought.
Mm. Horses tolerate humans. And then you said, but they're stressed out when most of us are on top of them. So that was interesting. That. Yeah,
that's right. Because it didn't feel gentle, right? Like in Jimmy's scenario with that horse. For a while, that horse is going to tolerate Jimmy getting back on the horse because it wasn't fun. It wasn't gentle. It's not going to kill me, and I know I'm going to be okay, but this is not something I'm choosing into. Horses have willingness, and they do have curiosity. So if you can get those two things and think about your own situation, anytime you can be willing to be curious, you're going to move from a state of caution to confidence. Anytime you can be willing and curious, you're going to move your mental state from a state of caution to confidence. Another way to say that is, if you are extremely cautious because of painful experiences in the past, you need to now become confident. There's self-awareness that has to come in, owning your own power, taking your own power back. The only way to move from caution to confidence is curiosity. Curiosity is the bridge from caution to confidence. So the question is, well, how do I get my confidence back? How do I take my power back? And this is what the prefrontal cortex, you've got to gentle your prefrontal cortex. You cannot control it. Your prefrontal cortex we're a clinically approved retreat system. And our clinician that comes in, he says most people have wild mustangs running through their minds. Mm-hmm. Well, you've got a wild mustang running through your mind because something really painful happened and now you're trying to survive. And anything something shows up that could look like what happened before, you're going to run from it, fight it, buck it off, right? You're going to keep your distance. That's survival, not thriving, right? And so the question is, how can I take my power back? Well, you always had your power, and you still got it. The problem is that you gave it away. And so the question is, well, how did I give my power away? Well, let's just look at that painful story that happened in the past. How do you talk about that story? What is it that... See, and I'm just going to use my own story. When my dad didn't show up, because he was gone all the time. I saw my dad like 4 hours a month. Now, when I saw him, he was great. But then you wake up one morning and you're like, he's never here. And so then my dad in my mind became a guy who didn't care, right? So now what's really happening is I'm hurt. My dad's not here. And I got to make sense of that pain. So my brain is powerful. My brain's going to start to tell a story. And that story doesn't have to be true. That story only has to feel true because I'm trying to make sense of painful feelings that I don't know how to work through. And so my dad doesn't care. And it's like, well, that may not be true. My dad might actually care. My dad may be struggling with his own, struggles, and he doesn't know how to be. He doesn't know how to show up. Maybe no one showed up for him. I'm not thinking that when I'm 14, 15 years old. I'm thinking my dad doesn't love me. See, that's a story that just in telling that story, it feels so true because it helps numb my pain. The problem is I'm actually blaming my dad. I'm blaming my dad for not showing up, and I'm blaming him for not being enough. And that story helps numb that pain. The problem is that it keeps the wound open. How I tell the story will keep the wound open, or it will heal the wound. If anybody in my story is blamed, that person will also be shamed, and my wound will always remain open. But if I can start to change the story and say, my dad was doing the very best he knew how to do. Now, it was painful. What's going to show up when I give my dad that empathy, that he was just doing the very best he knew how to do? Maybe he's just repeating generational patterns that are super dysfunctional. That's fine. But he was just doing the best he could do, and he really couldn't have done any better. And this is what Brené Brown says. She talks about this in her book, Rising Strong. There was a survey that was done. Are people doing the very best they can do? The answer is either yes or no. People that said yes were then asked, are you doing the very best you can do? And those same people said yes. And people that said no were asked, are you doing the very best you can do? And they said, I could always do a little bit better. So it's just a mirror. And so how we treat others and how we tell stories about others is really a projection of how we tell stories about ourselves somewhere. And we may not even have that kind of self-awareness. But you said earlier, we have those 4 ranch rules: no complaining, no blaming, no shaming, no sorrow wasted. The value of not complaining, blaming, and shaming is that you will not waste your sorrow. And the reason you won't waste your sorrow is because if you do not complain, the antidote to complaining is very simple. It's be grateful for what is. Be grateful for all that is. Because you've never complained about something you were grateful for. You didn't sit there and say, this thing is so wonderful in my life. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I have it. It's terrible. It just doesn't make sense. You've never complained about something you were grateful for. What you complain about is things that you don't understand why they happened. And so if you don't understand why it happened, it has no meaning. And if it has no meaning, it has no purpose. And therefore, it should not exist in my life. And therefore, I'm going to complain about it. And if I complain about something, well, the first thing that happens is I find fault in it. And if I find fault in it, that's the definition of blaming. I blamed the fault. It wasn't enough. And as soon as it's not enough, that's the definition of shaming. So if I complain, I'm going to automatically blame. And if I blame, I'm going to automatically shame. And now things happen to me, not for me. So then I've got this sorrowful, painful experience that has no meaning. I'm only blaming and shaming it. It wasn't enough. People weren't enough. The circumstance wasn't enough. Whatever all that is, that wound of pain where it all originally started from will always remain open. And it will bleed in the rest of your life. And you'll just keep repeating it because life is going to say, you've got to learn this particular lesson. And so what we don't repair, we repeat. And so this is why crap just keeps showing up over and over and over, is because there's a lesson that I'm missing. And why am I missing it? Because I'm complaining and blaming and shaming. And I'm mostly wasting my sorrow. And none of us want to waste our sorrow. So the antidote to all of that is really simple. if you look on a spectrum and you say, well, if I'm complaining, what's the antidote to complaining? And it's gratitude. And if I'm blaming, what's the antidote to gratitude? It's accountability. And if I'm shaming, what's the antidote to shaming? It's empathy. And so what you really need is gratitude, accountability, and empathy. And that's where we ought to put our time and our effort to figuring those things out. Because if we can figure those things out, we can go back to the narrative of our story and we can say, do I have gratitude? Am I taking accountability? And do I have empathy for everyone involved in the story? And if you can go through those three things, you will heal all of your emotional wounds. Because you'll tell the story differently, because the emotional wound exists in how you tell the story about what happened. That's how you heal your emotional wounds.
That is very wise. And I'm thinking, the other day I heard victims blame and victors learn. And I found that true. The more I've learned about things that have happened and why, and can now recognize them in other people who aren't seeing that for themselves, that helped me to move forward and to accept what 100%. Happened, that there's purpose in the pain.
Yes, always. Here's what we're not taught to do in our life. Well, I'll say it from a positive thing. We are not taught to sit with all of our emotions. What we are taught is to sit with all of our good emotions. Mm-hmm. If it's joyful and if it's happy and it feels super good, I'll sit with that all day long. Please give me more. I'll take 2. But our difficult emotions, our shadow emotions, we're not taught to sit with that. If I feel a shadowy emotion, take it away. I want none of it. Fix it. Tell it to go away. It won't go away. Think about it. When you've been running from all your emotion, the shadow emotions, or the emotions of your shadow, your entire life, and they keep showing up. They're going to show up tomorrow, and you know it. You know it's coming next month or next year. You know those shadows, and yet we're always running from them. When they go away is when we learn how to sit with them. The way to sit with your shadow emotions it's a very simple thing. Be grateful. That's it. Say thank you. Be gentle. I'll give you an example. This is a true story. I didn't think I was going to talk about any of this, by the way. But
well, I appreciate it. It's a great show.
4 nights ago, I was up in Salt Lake City. I was delivering some client horses and visiting a friend. He's got an awesome log home and this cool little ranch, horse property. And so they have guest bedroom, and I got to stay there. I was there for a couple of nights. The last night that I was there, I woke up at about 4 a.m. I don't know why I woke up. I don't remember having a dream or anything like that, but I woke up thinking about my children. And I was sad. That's just what I was. I was just sad. And I'm trying to learn this crap. I can speak really well, just as like a disclaimer. I can talk the talk, and I can say all the fancy ways of saying it. And I'm like a walking, long-haired, Jesus-looking, smiling guy who's really just a Pinterest account, right? Like I can make it look good and say it. I'm learning it myself, and it's so damn difficult. And I just sat there before the sun came up with these unexpected thoughts that just popped into my mind. And science has proven that we cannot control our thoughts, that our thoughts just generate thoughts. And my brain decided to generate some thoughts about my wonderful children that I haven't seen in a couple of years, that there's a lot of just sadness around that. And I just hugged myself. Now, if you can imagine like wrapping your arms like across your chest, you're crossing your arms fully across your chest. Your hands are kind of touching the back of your shoulders, or like your triceps, the back of your arms. And I found myself, I observed myself just like softly, gently rubbing the back of my arms and my shoulders, almost like a good loving mother would do, or a friend would do. And I just told myself, it's okay, Hugh. It's okay. This is sad. I'm so sorry you're feeling this, but it's okay. See, that's gentling the shadow emotion. Rather than saying, I'm going to get up, I'm going to avoid it, I'm going to go away from it, I'm going to buck it off, this doesn't feel good. Here's what science also shows. If we will love and be grateful for what shows up, within approximately about 90 seconds, the emotion will pass. Now, if you have a really wild Mustang running in your mind, you might dwell on the past and you might pick that story back up again. And so that's why it's so important that we have to change the narrative of what happened to us to a narrative of it happened for us. Because then I won't go back and pick it up. It might just show up, and then I honor it, and I say, thank you for showing up. I know you have a message. If it didn't have a message, you wouldn't have the emotion. I think it's really important also to understand that we are feelers who think, not thinkers who feel. We are feelers who think, not thinkers who feel. I think this can be proven in a really simple thought exercise. Here on earth, we have emotions. We are sentient beings. The Latin word, the Spanish word for feelings is sentimiento. And so we're sentient beings. We're beings of feelings and emotions. And you've had lots of experience in life. Maybe you went to Disneyland one time. Think about the emotions that it felt. Think about Christmas morning and the way that felt. Think about your happiest times. Think about your scariest times. Think about what those emotions were and what they felt like. Now, let's just run through that kind of scenario. Maybe you've held a baby and your own child in your arms for the first time, or maybe a loved one, you held for the first time, a first kiss. Remove the emotion, and what is the experience? You rode the roller coaster, but there was no emotion. See, there's no purpose and meaning in experiences, even if they're good, if there is no emotion. This is why we are feelers who have a very powerful prefrontal cortex that know how to reason and create and imagine. It's not the other way around. And so we're here on earth and we're having these experiences with our emotions. And half of our emotions we're running from and pushing away. All of us have pain. All of us have grief. All of us have sorrow. I think this is the story of Jesus. And whether you're Western, I'm not into organized religion, but I really am into, I really am into the story of Jesus, because I do think that there's some very profound messages with the shadow. If you want really incredible messages with the light side of our human experience, I think Buddha's got that's a great example. But if you want what to do with the shadow side of the human experience, I think nobody does it better than Jesus. Isaiah said, "He is a man of sorrow, well acquainted with grief." My mother, when I was a little boy, used to tell me, "You got to be like Jesus." And the older I got, and the more I read, and I wasn't going to school, but I was reading the stories and doing my own homework with it because it got my attention. I was like, I don't want to be a man of sorrow, well acquainted with grief. I don't want to be abandoned, abused, rejected. Right? These are the things that the writings say this was his experience. And that for a while, for many years, that didn't make any sense to me, because if he's perfect, then why is there so much sorrow, so much grief, so much abandonment, so much abuse, so much rejection. And it's because we don't know how to feel and sit with the other half of all of our emotions, the shadowy side. And so things happen to help you learn how to gentle yourself, because you are the medicine. And so you've got to feel these emotions because they're half of your entire human experience. And they're going to go away when you don't need them to go away. And you don't need them to go away when you've learned how to gentle them and be grateful for them and hear the message that they're saying. Anxiety has a message for you. Something is out of alignment, right? Pain says something is something I need to be aware of. And there's emotions, different types of emotions that are very difficult to sit with, but they have a beautiful message to help you align with what you really want in life. And so they're our greatest teachers, and we often skip class. And you're talking to a guy who got kicked out of 3 different high schools for skipping class, so I get this, a lot. And so these are things that we've got to figure out how to sit with. This is what our retreats are all about. It's this. And anyway, well, that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does, and it's interesting because I'm sitting here and the reason I started the Woman Behind the Smile, which is the organization that I founded, it's all because I felt like we were all putting up that smile and we're hiding the cracks.
Yes.
People want to see perfection, and we could spend a whole another hour because there's something, you talked about perfection is wholeness, not flawlessness. And I'll have you on another time because this is amazing. But I even find myself as a mom of 4, grandmother of 4, of getting into that, okay, guys, man up, woman up. And my daughter will calm me down sometimes and say, Mom, they just moved. She and her kids just moved. And the little one is feeling a little anxious. And I'm thinking, yeah, but there's so many new friends at the new school. And she goes, we have to let him just absorb the upset of leaving and get through those feelings, and then when we move and he gets the new friends, then he'll see the new friends. But you can't tell a 7-year-old it'll be okay, you'll get new friends, because he's feeling the sadness of leaving his old friends.
Yeah.
So mom here just has to zip it and absorb it and understand that that's so true. We in time he'll look back and, we moved 10 times in 11 years. I got friends everywhere. You do get through it. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you just have to live with that emotion. And I love what you're doing. How can people get a hold of you, watch what you're doing, the programs out in Utah? How do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way to send us a message on Facebook or Instagram. And it's Mustang Medicine. You can go to our website. We've got our email there. That's events@mustangmedicine.com. We have a 200-acre ranch that we've partnered with. We have 32 cabins that are, they're just amazing cabins, like really, really nice, high-end, yet simple. But you've got your heat, your AC, your fridge, your kitchen. We got a lake.
We're not going camping.
We got some cabins around no, you're not going camping at all. And we're surrounded by almost 1 million acres of BLM land. 10 miles down the road, we're riding through the Red Rocks and Snow Canyon State Park down here in southern Utah. Like some of the most incredible rides in Utah. We're warm. We have just right around 300 blue sky days. When it rains here, we get 10 inches a year. So, we're typically really, really warm and really nice, even through the winter. A cold day is like 40 degrees. And so it's just a perfect place for us. And our land is very sacred. We have Native Americans who have come out and dedicated this land, and we mindfully work with it ourselves. It is in immaculate condition. We have amazing groundskeeper who takes care of the land. And I think a lot of people come and, I mean, half the time they're just like, Hugh, shut up. I'm still trying to process what you said in your seminar from this morning. I'm just trying to take in the beauty and the stillness and the silence of the land. The Milky Way goes straight across, and we have zero light pollution. So you can just sit all night long and just watch the Milky Way. I mean, like, beautiful, beautiful place.
It's an amazing program, and boy, I'd get out there in a heartbeat. Thank you so much, my new friend. Thanks for listening to Stand Up and Speak Up. We are dedicated to encouraging you to remove the mask of embarrassment and being your best self. If you've been a victim of a scam or cybercrime, please visit againstscams.org for assistance and guidance about options in recovery. SCARS, the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, is an incorporated nonprofit crime victims assistance organization based in Miami, supporting scam victims worldwide. If you can, please make a small donation to help the victims around the world receive the help that they need. This episode has been sponsored by BenfoComplete.com, a vitamin supplement company that supports happy and healthy hands and feet for those with neuropathy. If you or anyone you know struggles with the pins and needles or numbness in their hands and feet, check out our benfotiamine products at BenfoComplete.com and use the special code STANDUP for 5% discount on your purchase. Again, thanks everybody for being here with us today. Go to my website, thewomanbehindthesmile.com, for additional information and resources. Check out my YouTube channel and subscribe, and follow the replays of all of our great guests. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks very much for being here.